the Pacific, a U.S. Navy carrier task force steams into Japanese waters. Lookouts signal the approach of enemy planes, and anti-aircraft shells fill the sky. The sky is filled with flaming tracers and shell fire. The plane dives to escape, but it's too late. Another zooms in to attack and meets the same fate. One after another, Japanese bombers are shot flaming into the sea. These are official Navy films, dramatic record of the terrific toll the Americans are taking of Japanese aircraft. More than 5,000 destroyed as the Allied sea and air offensive thunders on. West Point's colorful class of 1944 graduates upon a momentous day, the beginning of the Battle of Europe. From General Somervell, head of Army Service Forces, the 474 new officers hear a reassuring message of victory. Diplomas are awarded to cadets representing every state in the Union, a valuable addition to the armies of the United States. An outstanding graduate is the son of General Dwight D. Eisenhower, here with his mother. Young Eisenhower was one of 20 generals' sons to graduate this year. In a final stirring review, they say goodbye to school days. Soon they'll join their commands on battlefronts around the world. In the far west, Chinese air cadets training in the United States have already won the name of Flying Dragons. Today, they fly to New Mexico to visit a tribe of American Indians. The Indians stage the traditional Eagle Dance Festival in honor of their brothers from the Far East. Sons of ancient China and early America renew old ties of friendship. Up New York's Fifth Avenue, American fighting men are on parade as the nation opens its fifth war bond drive. Contingents from every branch of the armed forces are in the line of march. The demonstration finds the American people solidly backing Allied attacks in Europe and the Pacific. Their slogan, "Buy bonds for more bullets." General Clark honors American women attached to the Allied Fifth Army in Italy. For meritorious service, the general awards a plaque to the entire platoon. The mess sergeants salute the girls with a banquet in the field. After hours, the girls take time out for sports. and some even have their own victory gardens. Air Force men have a great time shopping in Italy. Using mostly sign language, they seem to be getting by. Eating is another problem. The waiter always brings the wrong thing. So the boys decide to go back to school and learn Italian right on the spot. And look who's the teacher. A young bambino who's having the time of his life, giving his American friends a sample of the language as it is spoken. This huge concentration of gliders at an American air base gives a dramatic picture of the role airborne troops are playing in the Battle of Europe. Shock troops, armed to the teeth, pile aboard. Jeeps and anti-tank guns are stowed away. In a flash, ground crews attach the tow ropes and the sky trains are off. Powerful troop-carrying transports hauling gliders fully loaded with soldiers and equipment. Over the target, they bail out. This is how they landed in Normandy, and they landed in numbers that surprised the enemy. They land with their noses in the dust. And one gets quite a mouthful. With technique tried and tested in North Africa, Italy, and the South Pacific, these hardy paratroopers are rewriting textbooks on military strategy. Ingenious recovery traps enable the planes to pick up the empty gliders at 5-second intervals. There they go, back for more troops. Airborne infantry spearheading the attack in Europe.
From platforms built to duplicate decks of troop transports, United States Marines rehearse invasion tactics they've already been called upon to use. Scrambling down cargo nets into assault boats, they go to establish bridgeheads upon some enemy beach. Soldiers of land, sea, and air, theirs is the tradition, first to fight, a role they've played for 165 years. Called the most versatile troops in the world, they bring their own tanks ashore. perfecting the technique of mechanized warfare under battle conditions similar to their landings in the Pacific. Today, the words, "The Marines have landed," have a special significance. For somewhere in the South Pacific, Navy transports are nosing their way, armed to the teeth, anti-aircraft guns on the alert, decks loaded with those same United States Marines, ready now for real action. Transporting supplies and equipment thousands of miles from their home bases. Their immediate objective, strategic outposts on the road to Australia. After months of training in just this sort of landing operation, the Marines set the stage for the attack that put the Japanese on the defensive. Welcomed by young and old alike, the Devil Dogs, as they're called, are at home in any climate. Admiral Byrd, the famous American polar explorer, is with the landing party as ancient tribal chieftains come to greet the officers. Every modern device is used to speed the unloading. For peaceful though this tropical paradise may appear, this is a vital theater of war in the Pacific. Today, garrisoning their bases for the first American offensive of the war, the Marines are living up to the tradition of the Corps, always first to fight. The U.S. Navy speeds the building of giant, non-rigid airships. To special women workers is entrusted the handmade construction of the bags. This is what they call walking air into the finished bag. Now it's ready for final inspection. Spotlights inside and out probe the surface for the smallest possible leak. Gondolas and motors, constructed in separate shops, are wheeled in and attached. The finished ship, newest of a vast fleet. Blimp patrols spell death to enemy submarines, and the U.S. Navy is on the job. The United States solves the wartime problem of transporting oil within the country. The plan, to supply pumping stations and tank cars by additional pipelines direct from the wells. Already, such networks spread across many states. This is the newest, the world's longest, a 550-mile pipeline stretching from Texas to Illinois, a distance equal to that between Marseille and Rome. Welded by sections right in the field, the carrier will have a capacity of 700,000 barrels a day. An ingenious device wraps the pipe with a protective covering that's said to preserve it for 100 years. With equipment like this, American engineers get things done in a hurry. "48 days to build a ship. That's a world record. And here are some of the sponsors ready for a mass launching. 6 cargo ships and 2 destroyers christened in one shipyard within 24 hours. Building a bridge of ships to win the war. A bridge of ships to ensure the peace. Here is one of many vacation camps in the United States. Camps where normal, healthy youngsters learn the meaning of freedom under the stars and stripes. Most of the children at this camp are Teutonic types, children of German-born parents. But the land of their adoption salutes them as Americans. Unregimented by state rule, they're free to romp and play like any other American kids on vacation. And and they invest their pennies in war stamps to help their country win these privileges for all children. Somewhere in California, the first all-Filipino regiment in the U.S. Army. Newly recruited, these grim, determined sons of the Philippines march with but a single purpose in life: to avenge their brothers who fought and died for General MacArthur. With their own Major Fajardo second in command, these adopted sons of America prove able soldiers. In small patrols, they quickly learn the tactics of modern warfare. Emerging from foxholes like those in which perished the heroes of Bataan, they prove born fighters, eager for action. Swinging the dreaded bolo knives of the Philippine jungle, they work for the day when they will help free their homeland from the invader. Flying Tigers, the famous American volunteer group, wing their way across China for the last time as volunteers. For 8 months, these Chinese signs have been the only insignia of the most spectacular and efficient fighting force in aviation history. Now, wearing the emblem of their native land, the U.S. Air Force, they become regular officers with American flying forces fighting in China. A Jap flag for every plane shot down. 200 in less than 4 months. Leader of the volunteers, Brigadier General Chenot, now promoted to command all American flying forces in China. Here he outlines the field of operations. With flags and souvenirs, a grateful Chinese people pay simple tribute to the airmen who have done so much to clear the skies over their embattled land. Clearing the skies for much-needed supplies. Supplies which in turn are exchanged for the valuable raw products of China. Losing no time, the new command plots the strategy of attack. By an elaborate far-flung system of Chinese listening posts, word is flashed, Japanese planes on the way, and the red ball goes up over the field. Signal for pilots to take to their ships. The Flying Tigers going into action for the first time in the uniforms of Uncle Sam. Newly assigned pilots go with the veterans. Schooled in the fighting tactics, Chenot has proven superior. Roaring aloft, they seek the enemy, their flying generals still at the controls. The new American Air Force over China, carrying on the tradition of the famous Flying Tigers. Largest fleet ever assembled in the Pacific. Battleships, cruisers, carriers, and transports. Steams for Tarawa, vital Japanese base in the middle of the Pacific. Tarawa, in the British Gilbert Islands, is one of the most heavily fortified of Jap air bases. Its recapture is important to the United Nations offensive. The invasion force moves into waters controlled by the Japanese fleet since 1941. In solemn reverence, men of the attacking force bow their heads in prayer. Ask God for guidance and aid as they approach the hostile shore. Dawn, and the Navy's big guns open fire. Marines attack. Shells and aerial bombs have pounded the island's 22 miles of fortifications incessantly. But the enemy is well entrenched, and landing boats are met with a terrific fire. As the first waves establish a beachhead, naval guns continue to shell Japanese positions inshore. Using hand grenades and bayonets, the Marines push forward inch by inch, wiping out pillboxes and machine gun nests one by one. Reinforcements arrive. Tarawa and the Gilbert Islands are in the hands of United Nations forces. The entire garrison, more than 4,000 Imperial Japanese Marines, annihilated in 76 hours. The most difficult, the most dangerous of all military operations achieved. Victory at Tarawa stands as a dramatic symbol of the growing offensive power of the United Nations in the Pacific. Smashed barbed wire and concrete emplacements along the coral-studded shore attest to the fury of the American attack. Heavy coastal batteries, now twisted and shattered. For 23 months, the Japs had fortified Tarawa, converted it from a peaceful copra trading post to one of the strongest bases in the Pacific. The fall of Tarawa is a vital blow to Japan. On the island were many Koreans, workers forced to labor in slavery by their Japanese masters. The vital airfield, rendered useless by continuous bombing, is quickly repaired as American construction battalions now turn Tarawa into a base against Japan. Firmly entrenched, United States Marines stand guard over the bloodiest battleground of the war in the Pacific. In the shadow of the pyramids near Cairo, Egypt, in the heart of the Muslim world, the leaders of China, Great Britain, and the United States meet face to face for the first time. President Roosevelt, Prime Minister Churchill, and Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek, united in the war against the Empire of Japan. Madam Chiang Kai-shek is here as advisor and interpreter to her husband. High commands of the United Nations powers mapping the blows that will strip Japan of the vast empire gained through 50 years of terror and aggression. Three great allies pledged to a common cause, the unconditional surrender of Japan. To Tehran, capital of Iran, the conferences moved. Here, 6,000 miles from Washington, 2,700 miles from London, and 1,500 miles from Moscow, the President and Prime Minister meet their great ally in the war against Nazi Germany, Marshal Joseph Stalin, Premier of Soviet Russia. The dramatic conference for which the world has watched and waited. Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill, climaxing a series of meetings that began with the Atlantic Charter and carried on through Casablanca and Moscow. Diplomatic representatives of the three nations are present: Molotov, Eden, Harriman. Mr. Churchill's daughter, Sarah, an officer in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, is introduced to Premier Stalin by President Roosevelt. A dramatic ceremony highlights the meeting: the presentation of the Sword of Stalingrad, gift of Britain's king to the people of that heroic city. Marshal Stalin accepts the tribute on behalf of the Russian people. Backed by the greatest concentration of military power in history, the Tehran Conference broadcasts its official communique to the world. We, the President of the United States of America, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, and the Premier of the Soviet Union, have met and expressed our determination that our nation shall work together in the war and in the peace that will follow. The common understanding which we have here reached guarantees that victory will be ours. We came here with hope and determination. We leave here friends in fact, in spirit, and in purpose. Warfare in New Guinea. Americans and Australians blasting the Japs in the campaign to take Buna. From the turret of an American tank, our cameraman brings a dramatic record of war as it is fought in this wild jungle country. Cautiously, troops advance against an unseen foe. For a month, they've pushed forward across the Owen Stanley Mountains, routing the Japs from foxholes and pillboxes concealed in the jungle, firing, blasting at every moving leaf. The objective at last. Buna mission is won. Southeastern New Guinea was an important Jap stronghold in the South Pacific. From here, they planned the invasion of Australia. Now, their equipment, their bases, are in Allied hands. For General Douglas MacArthur, it is a victory of major importance. Taking terrific toll of the enemy, Australians and Americans met the Japs on even terms and hurled the enemy back into the sea. The streets of the capital are thronged as Santiago hears the news that Chile has severed relations with the Axis. The United Nations have reassured this important South American republic that they can and will help her protect her 3,000 miles of coastline. Flags of all the allies are in evidence as Santiago reflects the sentiments of Chile's 5 million people. From the palace, President Rios looks upon a cheering populace, hailing Chile's defiance of the Axis. In the waters of Canada's British Columbia, the fishing fleet makes the biggest haul in 16 years. Millions of herring, 500 tons in this one catch alone. Norwegians have taken over the job formerly done by the Japanese, and they're bringing in enough fish in one day to fill 80 railway freight cars. Every pound will be packed and canned for United Nations soldiers overseas. A welcome wartime catch. Athletic sports take the spotlight in New York's huge Madison Square Garden as 16,000 enthusiasts turn out to see national collegiate champions set new records for speed. Here's Warmerdam, world's champion pole vaulter. Tonight, the Californian is aiming for better than 15 feet. And he clears the bar with inches to spare, a new mark for an indoor meet. Climax of the evening is the mile race. Stars are entered from leading American universities. New York University's Frank Dixon is setting the pace. Last time around, 3 men are left. Dodge, the national champion, is now in front. Trailing up to this point, Earl Mitchell is overtaking the leaders. Sprinting to the front with a magnificent burst of power, Mitchell steps out to win by 4 yards. Time 4 minutes, 8 6/10 seconds. United States man of war makes a trial run before joining the fleet. 41,000 tons of fighting ship, she's the fastest, most powerful battleship afloat. The bugle sounds general quarters, and 2,000 trained men go to battle stations to test the big guns. Powerful 16-inch rifles swing towards the target. Observers, hooded and dressed for below-zero cold, are at their posts. America's greatest, the mightiest dreadnought ever built, is going into action. Miles northwest of Darwin, Australia, the Pacific island of Timor has been held by the Japanese for nearly a year. But behind enemy lines, deep in the interior, a force of Australians have held out against all efforts of the Japs to locate and dislodge them. For months, Jap planes sought their hideouts. And while Australia gave them up for lost, the men assembled a radio set from bits and pieces stolen in raids on the enemy. Finally, they hammered through their message to Darwin. SOS, Timor to Australia, Timor to Australia. And the message flashed across the Timor Sea is heard in Darwin. On the mainland, officers suspect a Jap trick. No white men are supposed to be alive on Timor. Darwin radios the cautious question. What is the Christian name of Jack Sargent's wife? Answer immediately. And the men on Timor flash the answer, Joan. In this way, Australia was satisfied. Secretly, food, clothing, and ammunition were rushed to the beleaguered Australians on their 7,000 square mile outpost. Letters from home for men long given up for lost. With fresh supplies and friendly native help, the Australians launch an attack on Japanese-occupied territory. Moving up over mountains, through jungles, they take the enemy by complete surprise. Congratulates his men. Hardy, rugged fighters, they've won every skirmish against the Japs, and they're staying right there to carry on the fight. No longer a lost battalion, the men of Timor are living symbols of the United Nations' determination to smash the Japs.
Battleship Missouri, 53,000-ton flagship of Admiral Halsey's Third Fleet, becomes the scene of an unforgettable ceremony marking the complete and formal surrender of Japan. In the Bay of Tokyo itself, the United States destroyer Buchanan comes alongside, bringing representatives of the Allied powers to witness the final capitulation. General of the Army Douglas MacArthur, Supreme Allied Commander for the occupation of Japan, boards the Missouri. Fleet Admiral Nimitz, Pacific Fleet Commander, and Admiral Halsey welcome MacArthur and his Chief of Staff, General Sutherland, aboard. Admiral Nimitz escorts General MacArthur to the Missouri's veranda deck, where the 20-minute ceremony is to take place. It is Sunday, September 2nd, 1945. Cameramen and reporters of many countries record this historic moment as United Nations military leaders crowd aboard the Missouri and examine souvenir cards bearing the Japanese flag, special mementos of the occasion. And now, in a Navy launch, the Japanese surrender party arrives. They are headed by aged Mamoru Shigemitsu, Foreign Minister of the Japanese Surrender Cabinet, who was wounded by a Korean patriot in Shanghai years ago and walks on an artificial leg. The Japanese delegation lines up on the opposite side of the surrender table from the Allies. A war which had entered its 8th terrible year in China, which had raged for 3 years and 9 months for America and Britain, which was the brutal, costly eastern half of the most horrible worldwide war in human history, is now within minutes of ending for good. General MacArthur speaks.
We are gathered here, representatives of the major warring powers, to conclude a solemn agreement whereby peace may be restored. The issues involving divergent ideals and ideologies have been determined on the battlefields of the world. and hence are not for our discussion or debate. The terms and conditions upon which surrender of the Japanese imperial forces is here to be given and accepted are contained in the instrument of surrender now before you. As Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, I announce it my firm purpose, in the tradition of the countries I represent, to proceed in the discharge of my responsibilities with justice and tolerance while taking all necessary dispositions to ensure that the terms of surrender are fully, promptly, and faithfully complied with. I now invite the representatives of the Emperor of Japan and the Japanese government and the Japanese Imperial General Headquarters to sign the instrument of surrender at the places indicated.
Mr. Shigemitsu comes to the surrender table. These dramatic first pictures were made by newsreel war correspondents and Army and Navy cameramen and were specially flown back from Tokyo. The time is 9:05 a.m. The Japanese have been on board exactly 10 minutes. General Yoshijiro Umetsu of the Imperial General Staff signs for the Japanese Army. The surrender documents by which Japan agrees to lay down arms completely and to obey all Allied orders issued by General MacArthur were printed by the Army on rare parchment found in a basement in ravaged Manila. General MacArthur signs as Supreme Allied Commander. The first pen used is presented to General Wainwright of Corregidor. The second pen to British General Percival, Commander at the surrender of Singapore. MacArthur uses 6 pens in all, affixing what will be the most important signature in Japan to the document that ends permanently that nation's regime of terror and aggression. For the forces of the United States itself, Admiral Chester Nimitz signs. Behind Nimitz are the Third Fleet's Admiral Halsey and Admiral Sherman, famed amphibious commander. General Su Young Chang, Chief of Military Operations for the Chinese National Council, signs for China. Admiral Sir Bruce Fraser, Commander of the British Pacific Fleet for the United Kingdom. Lieutenant General Kumza Nikolaevich Derevyanko for Soviet Russia. General Sir Thomas Blamey for Australia. Colonel Lawrence Moore Cosgrave for Canada. General Jacques Leclerc, hero of Africa and Paris, for France. Admiral C.E.L. Helfrich for the Netherlands. Air Vice Marshal L.M. Issett for New Zealand. Concluding the brief history-making ceremony, General MacArthur expresses a wish.
Let us pray that peace be now restored to the world and that God will preserve it always. These proceedings are closed.
Swarms of United States aircraft fly in formation overhead as the ceremony ends. The final United Nations victory has been won. The war is over. Peace is here.
Japanese troops leave for the conquest of Manchuria. Japan, the first of this war's aggressor nations, starting out a full 14 years ago on a career of international conquest and pillage. Shanghai in 1937, full-scale warfare against China. The world was still unready to deal properly with such wanton aggression. Japan's diplomats addressing the League of Nations attempted to justify their crimes against peace and decency, and then walked out. The long series of brutal attacks upon an unprepared neighbor continued. Japan seized a whole new empire, set up puppet rulers, grew even more self-confident and aggressive as she fed on other people's suffering. Japan's successful imperialism encouraged other aggressors. Italy invaded Ethiopia. Later, Germany and Italy, by military intervention, helped overthrow the Republican government in Spain. Three nations toasted the consummation of an infamous alliance, the Axis Military Pact of 1940. Germany and Italy, who had plunged Europe into war, became fully united with Japan in the strategy of terror. And through it all, bleeding, pillaged China continued as the scene of misery and death. Millions of her people were made homeless. With indomitable courage, but pathetically inadequate weapons, the Chinese fought back. Alone, they kept the resistance to Japanese imperialism alive. Kurosu and Nomura, Japanese envoys to the United States, described themselves as missionaries of friendship and peace. While they were still negotiating, their countrymen struck a savage blow unparalleled in infamy. Pearl Harbor, December the 7th, 1941. In spite of crippling damage, the United States fleet, augmented by British, Australian, and Dutch units, set out to find the enemy. In the battles of the Coral Sea and Midway, the Japanese advance was halted. Even as the enemy made fast his grip on Hong Kong, Burma, Manila, Singapore, the Allies began the long journey back at Guadalcanal. Step by step, the Japanese were beaten back at Bougainville, Tarawa, Kwajalein, Saipan, Guam. In the Philippines, under Japanese rule, Allied prisoners had been subjected to indescribable suffering. The Filipino people had never stopped fighting. Douglas MacArthur had promised them, "I shall return," and return he did. Iwo Jima, only 450 miles from Japan, the full power of the American Pacific fleets, of land, sea, and air forces, tirelessly rehearsed in combat through scores of swift amphibious invasions, struck a semifinal blow. The Japanese dead ran into the hundreds of thousands, and once again, a flag of liberty was dramatically run up. Under General Buckner, who gave his life there, combined American forces fought the long and costly campaign for Okinawa in the Ryukyus, at the very doorstep of Japan. It was Japan's final hour. and in incredibly furious combat, enemy soldiers had to be destroyed cave by cave and one by one. But finally, their morale cracked open by American power. The first masses of Japanese soldiers began to give up voluntarily. Japan's fanatical suicide corps, in desperation air attacks, inflicted heavy damage on American naval forces off Okinawa. This was kamikaze. It was sensational, but it could never stop the Allied advance. B-29s, scourge of Japan's home islands, mighty engines of destruction bringing home the lesson of Pearl Harbor. From hard-won Okinawa, from the carrier-based planes of the 3rd and 5th Fleets, Japan came under the inevitable reign of ruin. Allied sea forces moving up to the Japanese home island shelled the mainland almost without opposition. Admiral Halsey's ranging naval might was helping to hammer the enemy to his knees. But there was to come. The unimaginably destructive atomic bomb perfected by Allied scientists. First mission, the industrial city of Hiroshima. Second mission, the port of Nagasaki. Japan had its choice, complete surrender or complete ruin. At Potsdam, even as they laid the foundations for a stable European peace, Clement Attlee, Harry Truman, and Joseph Stalin had decided on common action against Japan. As agreed at Yalta, Russia joined the Allies in war on the last remaining Axis enemy. Japan's stronghold in Manchuria was attacked. For Emperor Hirohito and for Japanese militarism, the war was lost. Japan sued for peace. In Washington, Secretary of War Stimson and Secretary of State Burns hurried to the White House with Secretary of Navy Forrestal. The United States Cabinet, meeting with President Truman, studied Japan's surrender messages in full coordination with the governments of Britain, China, and Russia, and other allies. The world remembered Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Commander-in-Chief, American war casualty. Years of grave responsibility took their toll. A grateful world honors him today. Douglas MacArthur, leader of Pacific armies, now named Supreme Allied Commander in Japan. Chiang Kai-shek, leader of fighting China. Chester Nimitz, commander of the mighty Pacific fleets. Harry S. Truman, 4 months after taking oath as president, leads his country finally to victory and peace. Mr. Truman and his cabinet meet in emergency session. Former Secretary Hull is on hand as the president breaks the momentous news of Japan's surrender.
I have received this afternoon a message from the Japanese government in reply to the message forwarded to that government by the Secretary of State on August 11th. I deem this reply a full acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration, which specifies the unconditional surrender of Japan. In the reply, there is no qualification. Arrangements are now being made for the formal signing of the surrender terms at the earliest possible moment. General Douglas MacArthur has been appointed the Supreme Allied Commander to receive the Japanese surrender. Great Britain, Russia, and China will be represented by high-ranking officers. Meantime, the Allied armed forces have been ordered to suspend offensive action. The proclamation of VJ Day must await upon the formal signing of the surrender terms by Japan.
Newsmen rush the president's report to a waiting world, and through the early evening, Tuesday, August 14th, the fateful news is flashed. In New York City, as throughout a rejoicing nation and world, vast throngs of grateful, happy people celebrate the end of fighting, the dawn of peace. 2 million New Yorkers jam Times Square. It's official. It's all over. It's total victory. Rejoicing continues. Never before in history has there been greater reason to be thankful for peace. The world's free people are united in their determination that the world's peace shall never be endangered again.